In episode 144 of the Guitar Music Theory podcast, I tell you which guitar scales you should learn. Greetings, guitar engineers. Welcome to the Guitar Music Theory podcast. I am your host, Desi Cerna, author of Fretboard Theory, Guitar Theory for Dummies, and more. Today, I'm going to tell you which guitar scales you should learn. If you are new to guitar, or you're still in those stages where you're still trying to get things together and become a good player, you know that learning guitar scales is something that's necessary. We use scales to play riffs and melodies and solos and bass lines. But you might be unsure which scale patterns you need to learn. You can go to your local music store and get a scale book for guitar, and it's got a variety of different types of scales and patterns. And you might think that you need to learn all of them if you want to be able to play songs that are on the radio and play in the style of various popular genres. But I'm here to tell you that there's actually just two types of scale patterns that most of popular music is based on. We're going to get into that in today's lesson. But before we do, let me direct all of my podcast listeners over to my website, guitarmusictheory.com. Answer the question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that is calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with bar chords, finger picking, playing guitar solos, or you want to delve deeply into music theory, I have a free video course for you. I can put you on a plan to fill gaps in your knowledge and fill gaps in your playing so you can become a better player, move forward, and reach your music goals. Enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. All right, we are ready to dive in. Before we begin, I have made a video for this lesson, and you can find it on my social media profiles. Just search Desi Cerna Guitar at YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. This video is going to come in at over 10 minutes, so it might be best to watch it on YouTube or Facebook. Make sure you are following my profiles, so subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff. And if you do view the video, leave a positive comment, click like, share, do that sort of thing. Would you? I'd appreciate the support. All right, so our topic today is which scales should you learn? I'm going to back up here because I know that some of my listeners are new to guitar and new to music, so I don't want to assume that you even know what a scale is. So let's just briefly talk about that, and then we'll get into how scales are used on guitar and which scales you should learn. So a scale is a series of notes that you play in an ascending or descending fashion. That's like the major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And we use scales to play melodies, riffs, solos. We work them into chord changes, all sorts of things. So that's a type of scale. That's a major scale there. Sometimes we use scales called pentatonic scales. Scales are used to play guitar solos. Scales are even used to play bass lines. Scales are also used, you can harmonize them to play That's where chords come from. You like how I skipped that minor 7 flat 5 chord there at the end? Those of you that know a little bit about music theory. Anyway, I digress. So that's why we learn scales. Whenever you see guitar players playing some single note lines, it's typically scales. And if you're like me, when I was a young up-and-coming guitar player, I went to my local music store and wanted to get a book on scales. And so I found a book on scales, and it had page after page of all these different scales that had different names and different patterns and stuff. And there was the major scale and the minor scale and the Dorian mode and the moxicillin mode, and that's not a real mode. I made that up. And there was, harmonic minor, melodic minor, whole tone, half tone scale, half tone, whole tone scale, the diminished scale, the gypsy, Phrygian. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I've got to learn all these scales and remember all these patterns. And, I wanted to get good. And so as I'm listening to music and watching my guitar heroes and seeing how they're just playing all these awesome lead lines all over the fretboard, I thought, oh gosh, I got to learn all of my scales or I'm not going to be able to do that. And so I began that journey, that process. And long story short, over time, as I actually started playing music, I started to realize, wait a minute, almost everything comes back to one of two types of scales. And they are either the pentatonic scale or the major scale. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail here in the audio podcast than I do in the video, but the video is great because you can see me playing. You can see me playing the song examples that I have coming up, and I've got some diagrams and stuff there on the screen. So make sure you watch that video. But here, I'll talk a little bit more. You could make an argument that really the only scale patterns you need to learn would be the major scale. Because the major scale is fundamental to music and to music theory, and it's the measuring stick that we use in music. It's where we get intervals. It's how we build chords. And all other scales, their structure is thought of, it's measured against the major scale. It's thought of, how does it measure against the major scale? That's where we would say, like, oh, this scale has got a root third, minor third, or root second, minor third, flat sixth, that sort of thing. What we're saying is, in comparison to a major scale, it has a flattened third, or it has a flattened sixth, or it has a raised this or raised that. So learning the major scale is really important. On guitar, you hear a lot of talk about pentatonic scales. Penta means five, so the five-tone scale. And the five-tone scale is really just a simplified major scale where you take some of those half steps out. So instead of, you get, that's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it repeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it repeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whereas the major scale has 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so on. So the pentatonic can be thought of as really just being derived from the major scale or being a simplified version of the major scale where you take some of the half steps out. On guitar, though, we typically think of the scales being different because they make different shapes and patterns on the fretboard, and we guitar players are very shape and pattern focused because the strings and the frets make a big grid, and so that's how we visualize things on the fretboard, and that's how we navigate the fretboard. We also think a lot about the fingering for something, and so pentatonic fingerings feel different than major scale fingerings. There's less notes. We don't have the half steps. Less fingers are typically involved. So while theoretically you could say there's a relationship between pentatonic and major, the pentatonic is just, it comes out of the major scale, or you could say that the major scale is just the pentatonic with some half steps added. We really think of them as two different types of patterns, and you really need to kind of learn, I believe you need to learn them separately. So I think you want to learn these so-called pentatonic scale patterns and see how guitarists use them to play riffs and solos and bass lines and melodies, and that sort of thing. Get used to the fingerings, get used to the interval structure of the scale, that, the distance between the notes is what I'm talking about, and the distance between those notes on the fretboard. And then learn major scale patterns. Now you have more notes. We've got half steps, more fingers are involved. You're picking more notes per string. So they're more complicated in that way because there's more notes. You want to learn those patterns, see how they're formed on the fretboard, get used to those shapes and those fingerings, and see how musicians use those patterns to play melodies and riffs and solos and maybe even a bass line or something like that. Sometimes if you're not a bass player, it's still helpful to learn some bass lines. And then you can start to, just as you learn music, you're going to start to see how things are either going to fall into a pentatonic pattern or they're going to fall into a major scale pattern. In other words, it's either going to have the half steps or it's not going to have the half steps, or sometimes it might go back and forth, or it might be a combination. But we guitar players just kind of, we typically think, we base ourselves in a pentatonic or a major scale pattern, and at some point it kind of blends together. That's where I am now. But if you're learning these things for the first time, I think that it's best to, I actually recommend starting with the pentatonic scale patterns. Some teachers are like, no, you should start with the major scale because it's the fundamental scale in music, and then learn the simpler pentatonic patterns. I like to teach pentatonic scale patterns first because they are simpler, they're easier to play. There's tons of great pentatonic riffs that you can play that aren't difficult. That's My Girl by the Temptations, C and F major pentatonic. I played a little bit of Money earlier by Pink Floyd, B minor pentatonic. Not terribly difficult to play. You could even learn some guitar solos. I'm thinking maybe something like this is Breakdown by Tom Petty. Pentatonic based, A minor pentatonic there. Simple. This is something that a beginner can jump into this, and it's not too far out of reach, and you can play something. You can start getting those fingers working on your fretting hand and coordinating your fretting hand with your picking hand and working on all those skills you need to play guitar. I think that just focusing on the pentatonic first works best. I teach pentatonic scales first, and like my book Fretboard Theory or Guitar Theory for Dummies, and then later I say, okay, once you get those kind of under your belt, let's add some notes and let's play full major scales now. And then I introduce songs that would use that. I played a little bit of Friend of the Devil by Grateful Dead. And there's other stuff that would be based in major scale patterns, and it would have those half steps in there. And so as you learn scale patterns, it's important that you don't just memorize a pattern, but you understand how it's used musically and in which songs specifically. So if you've got one of my books or video courses, you know that I'm constantly referencing familiar songs, and I'll tell you, hey, you just learned the scale pattern. My Girl plays right up this scale pattern. Go learn it, play it. Or, Smells Like Teen Spirit is in this scale pattern. Go learn a portion of that solo, because then it becomes musical. Then you get it. Like, you see how it's actually used in context to play music. You don't want to just play up and down a pattern. You want to know how you use it melodically, You want to know when do you slide or bend or use a hammer-on or pull-off. You want to pay attention to when songs are using overdrive or echo or something like that to bring the lead line to life. That way you're really learning how to play. So you can't just memorize a pattern. You got to learn song parts so you see how those patterns are actually used musically. So in popular styles of music, so that's going to include pop, rock, blues, country, most of what you hear is either based in pentatonic patterns or major scale patterns. Now it gets a little bit more complicated than that because there's different ways that the pentatonic can be applied. The pentatonic could be major or it could be minor. Major scales have modes, and all that means is any one of the 7 notes of a major scale could be your starting point, in which case the whole structure of the scale changes and the sound of the scale changes. And those are called different modes. The most common of the modes would be the major scale, and then the relative minor, which starts on the 6th degree. But it's important to realize that if you hear someone say major scale, minor scale, or Dorian mode, Phrygian mode, Lydian mode, Mixolydian mode, they all use the very same patterns because they're all derived from the major scale and they're all based in major scale patterns. I get into modes and all that stuff in my guitar theory books and video courses as well. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now, but you just need to understand, if you want to learn that stuff, then you need to learn your major scale patterns because that's what they're all based on. And you need to learn those pentatonic scale patterns, and you learn when you use it in its major form or its minor form. Sometimes you hear people talk about the blues scale, where they add in a blues note or add in some chromatic passing tones or something like that. So you kind of learn how those things are added. But what happens is you realize, though, that all of this stuff comes back to either one type of pattern or the other. It's basically a pentatonic pattern or it's a major scale pattern. So let's have some fun here. I actually want to just give you some examples of familiar songs that are based in these patterns. Because you might be thinking, I don't know, Desi, I listen to some pretty cool music and I have a hard time believing that it comes down to just these 2 types of patterns. Well, let's have some little fun here. And I've got my wah-wah pedal hooked up here. Very excited about that. I don't know if I've ever used this on the podcast. So let's start with some Jimi Hendrix. Voodoo Child, Slight Return. All right, let's turn that wah pedal off. So that's a classic example of minor pentatonic. And that riff is just right in that pattern. How about The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King? Let's see, let's switch sounds here a little bit. By the way, I'm playing my PRS McCarty 594, which is just an amazing guitar. This is the core model. Yes, I know they're expensive, but I'm telling you what, this thing is such a beauty. I use it in the video, and it's so gorgeous. And everything about this guitar is such high quality. It's probably the best guitar I have in terms of just quality of parts and build quality and finish and all of that stuff. I have Seymour Duncan 59 pickups, which are Elnico 5 magnet, lower output, has more of a traditional lower output humbucker sound. The pickups that come in this guitar are really cool, but I just wanted something a little bit different for now, so that's what I have in here. I'm playing through my Kemper profiling amplifier, and I'm going to be switching sounds here, but I believe that all of these sounds, most of these sounds are they are profiles of like a vintage Marshall Plexi amp, like a 100-watt Marshall. and then I'm adding some effects and some overdrives on top of that. That's what you're hearing. So we're talking about playing some familiar songs just so you can see. I'm going to just give you a variety of some classic guitar songs here and just point out that, hey, it's either based in pentatonic or major. I just played Voodoo Child. Here's a little bit of a song that's so well known. I just totally forgot the name of it. The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King. So that was B minor pentatonic. Pentatonic. So much of our blues and blues-based rock music is pentatonic. You got to learn those scales for sure. You could probably, many famous guitar players have probably made a living knowing mainly just the pentatonic scales. How about some Pink Floyd here? Wish You Were Here. I'm strumming some chords, but these single notes that you hear me play, that's all pentatonic. This is G major pentatonic. And then when that lead guitar comes in, it's all G major pentatonic. G major. Some people might call that E minor pentatonic because G major and E minor are relative major and minor. That just means that they use the same notes and the same patterns. Just depends on, is the G the root or is the E minor the root? The chords underneath go back and forth between G and E minor, so I guess you could consider either one the root there, but I think of it as G major. So those are some pentatonic examples. Let me give you some major scale examples. And the biggest difference with major scales is now we have half steps in there. We have more notes and we have half steps. And my first example will be Nirvana. This one. This is actually in the F minor scale here. But it's still using major scale patterns. F minor is relative to A flat major. If I take the A flat major scale but just start on its 6th degree, that's the F minor scale. So if you know your A major scale patterns, and then you know how to, you start on its 6th degree, boom. Now you have the minor scale there. And that's what I was using. We have those half steps. Half steps there. Let's keep going. How about this one? Let's see if I can make it through this one. This is a little bit of Reelin' in the Years by Steely Dan. And this is actually an A Mixolydian mode. Wow, that sounds complicated. No, not really. It's actually just the D major scale. But if I go back and start in its 5th degree, A Mixolydian mode is just, it's based out of D major scale patterns. So I'm giving you some different sounds here. We had Smells Like Teen Spirit and F minor. Now we've got Reelin' in the Years and A Mixolydian, but they're actually both still based in major scale patterns. Let's do another one. How about, I'm acting like I'm pulling this stuff out of my butt. I got a list in front of me, people, because I already made the video. Where's my sound for this one? Light My Fire by The Doors. So this is an A Dorian mode. But A Dorian mode is just using the G major scale, but starting at its second degree A. So I'm using G major scale patterns here. And we've got the half steps in there. Just another example of different sounds that are made in popular styles of music, yet it all comes back to the same patterns. Now, sometimes you'll have a combination of both. You'll have lead lines that might have portions that are strictly pentatonic, and then other times you might add in some notes that are from the full major scale or the full minor scale, something like that. And a good example of this would be Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Let's see. So this is in, you could think of this as being in like A minor pentatonic. But there's times when Page adds in an F note from the minor scale. Ties right into the F chord in there, so he does it again here. There's the notes that's in the pentatonic, but then there's an extra note added from the full minor scale. So that's an example of where you kind of mix back and forth there a little bit. Let's keep going. How about Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry? So this is in B flat, and it's actually using B flat Mixolydian mode. And the B flat scale patterns come out of the E flat major scale. So once again, I'm using major scale patterns here, just applying it a little bit differently. I'm playing a mode of that, and I'm getting the Johnny Be Good sound. Now I'm also adding in, there's a major third. But there's a minor third that's used in Johnny Be Good too. And you can think of that minor third as maybe coming out of the minor pentatonic. So a lot of guitar players would think about Johnny Be Good as kind of mixing scales there. You've got the Mixolydian mode, which is also called the dominant scale. Hey, you don't need to know all this stuff right now. If you want to learn this stuff, I've written books on it. And I got video courses too. But I'm just throwing this out here because you hear these different sounds. You hear about these different scales and stuff, you know, this mode and this scale and that scale. And you might think, oh, I got to learn all these different patterns. But what I'm trying to get across is, no. They all come out of these two basic type of patterns, pentatonic or major scale. And sometimes we kind of mix them and put them together. So we've got some of the dominant scale Mixolydian mode, some of the minor third there, so. You could also think of Johnny B. Goode as mixing the B-flat major pentatonic and the B-flat minor pentatonic. Major pentatonic, minor pentatonic. And when these patterns kind of cross over each other, you end up getting some half steps and stuff in there. And that's where you get stuff like. So that's another way to think about it. All right, let's move to another example, and I'm going to have to bank up. Let's see, what was that strange noise? Okay, let's find. I've got a sound here that's going to sound. I'm going to do Eric Johnson. Let's do some Eric Johnson. Here's my Eric Johnson-esque sound. Cliffs of Dover, one of the most epic guitar instrumentals ever recorded, in my opinion. If you've never heard Eric Johnson, Cliffs of Dover. It's unbelievable. And I remember hearing that when I was young and being blown away. Like, I just couldn't believe the sounds this guy was making, and the way that he was just so expertly firing off all of these licks from the fretboard and moving his fingers so quickly. And I remember I was in a music store, and they had an Eric Johnson instructional video on the screen. And he was going to talk about the scales that he used. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I need to know what scales this guy's using to get these sounds, because I'm at home fiddling with like some major scales and pentatonic scales, but I don't sound like him. What kind of scales could he possibly be using? And of course his answer was that he was using the same patterns. And I was like, what? So I realized I needed to learn how to use those patterns better. But in Cliffs of Dover, I've learned a portion of that. I got a video on YouTube if you just search Desi Cerner Cliffs of Dover. And as I was going through that, like, there's times when I see some of the licks and phrases is kind of fitting into the G major pentatonic. There's times when I realize he's got half steps and stuff in there, I can't remember all of the lines. I'll go pull up my own video and relearn it. But so I kind of think of it as going back and forth. I realize I'm in G major, and sometimes I'm seeing the familiar G major pentatonic patterns and how a lick or line fits right into it. And other times I'm seeing a G major scale pattern because there's half steps and stuff in there. Then you get the main hook in the song. So now I've got some half steps and whole steps and stuff in there, so major scale pattern. So just another example, whereas, you might listen to that song like I did when I was young and think, oh gosh, surely he can't be using the basic patterns. Yes, he is. So we've covered some examples where you just use pentatonic patterns in major and minor. We've covered examples where you'd use major scale patterns, including the relative minor or maybe one of the modes, how you might mix some of those up. One more scale that comes into the mix is the harmonic minor. And the harmonic minor is basically just the minor scale with a raised seventh. There it is. That's it. And this does come up quite a bit in popular music. So you definitely want to be familiar with harmonic. Well, you want to be familiar with the harmonic minor scale, but you don't necessarily need to learn harmonic minor scale patterns. You can just use your base major scale patterns and understand how they're used to play the relative minor, like I just did. I played the B minor scale, which is just D major scale patterns starting on its 6th degree B. And then I know that if I raise that last note, that's harmonic minor. And the way that harmonic minor is used in music is it's only used temporarily. There'll be certain spots in the music where you'll touch on that raised 7th. But then the rest of the music is just going to be natural minor. So you really don't need to go learn harmonic minor scale patterns across the whole fretboard. You could, if you want to do that. Maybe you're listening to music that really emphasizes harmonic minor a lot, and there's a lot of playing up and down the patterns, and so maybe that would be helpful to you. But my experience playing in bands and teaching and playing music for decades now is that I don't really need to know the harmonic minor patterns. I just need to know where that one harmonic minor note is, and I need to know how to touch on it at times, because that's how it's used. And a good example of this would be Hotel California. So there's harmonic minor in there. You're hearing some B. Most people would think of harmonic minor as B minor pentatonic or maybe the B minor scale, and then listen for the harmonic minor note. You ready? Right there. Did you catch that? Because normally the scale would be, but there's that harmonic minor note, and it actually is the major third of the chord at that point, which is F sharp 7. But there's that one harmonic minor note. Other than that, I'm just thinking like B minor in my head. Oh. Let me do that again. I love how it bends into that harmonic minor note. So, it might come up in other songs too, like think about Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. That's in the F major scale, or you might think of the relative minor, D minor. They're relatives, so the same notes, same patterns, all that stuff. But right here, I have an A major chord. It's got the harmonic minor note in it. That's why I get an A major chord in D minor. And you do hear that touched on at times, in there. So Mark Knopfler plays some arpeggios where he's touching on that harmonic minor note in that song at times. It's just a little bit here and there, so you don't really need to go through and relearn the whole fretboard and learn harmonic minor scale patterns necessarily. Now, sometimes you might actually come across a lead line a lengthier lead line that might descend or ascend a harmonic minor scale. And a good example of that would be Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, and that main solo when Slash kicks on the wah-wah pedal, like I just did, and he goes into what is usually everyone's favorite part, this part. That's actually ascending the E harmonic minor. There it is. But it's just the E minor scale. But I take that 7th note and I just raise it. And so, but it does play enough of it that you can kind of put a whole pattern here together. I'm not sure if I'm playing this exactly right, but I know I'm in the ballpark. I know he's climbing up the harmonic minor scale. I know I got to touch on that major 7, D sharp there, and I know I got to get that wah pedal going. Oh, it's that ending part I always mess up. I don't know, something like that. I have a video for that up on YouTube that I did years ago, which I would like to redo because I slapped it together, and then afterwards I'm like, ugh, that could have been better. But it's still very helpful. So if you're interested in learning that song, I can definitely help you out there. Just search "Sweet Child of Mine," Desi Cerna on YouTube, and you will find it. All right, well, I think that's enough of examples here. So the main point of this lesson is that, well, you do have a lot of work to do. If you want to learn how to play, a variety of popular music styles and songs and play these lead lines and stuff, it takes work. I'm not saying it doesn't take work, but you're going to get off track if you're putting time into practicing patterns that this music isn't based on. And I did that for a while, and I regretted it. And then I realized, okay, well, that was silly. And, it's unfortunate that when some of these music publishers decided they were going to publish books to teach scales to guitarists, they really could have wrapped things up with a few chapters. Like, here's pentatonic patterns, and here's major scale patterns, and that's also your modes and your relative minor. But, they got to fill the book up to sell content, I guess. And maybe, because some people might be studying music and they want to know, like, theoretically what other types of scales exist. Like I did, I was curious. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, these other scales don't really come up. They might come up in like bebop jazz or something like that, like the altered scale and that sort of thing. But I wasn't playing bebop jazz. And if you listen to different styles of music around the world, there might be different types of scales. But I was playing pop, rock, blues, stuff that was on classic rock radio stations, stuff that most guitar players want to play. And I realized, it all comes down to pentatonic and major scale patterns. So you really want to focus on that. That's why I emphasize those in my guitar theory books and videos. And then you want to work on learning all the different ways that those types of patterns are applied in popular styles of music. And I can help you with that too. If you get any one of my books, I do reference a lot of familiar songs, so you're not left just wondering what songs it's used in. I tell you specifically. I'll say "Sweet Child of Mine's got harmonic minor," or I'll tell you that "Smells Like Teen Spirit" is, F minor based out of A flat scale patterns. Then, you can go look up that song, find a YouTube video. You might find one of my videos. I have tons of little song lesson videos on YouTube. But whatever, you might find it on Ultimate Guitar or something. But at least now you're not just memorizing tab. You know what you're doing. You're connecting. You're like, Desi taught me these patterns. He explained how they work and how this is minor. And he referenced this song. Now I see how this works. And as you do that over time, things start to make sense on the fretboard. You start to understand the music that you're listening to and you're playing. And that's what it's all about. And that's what's going to help you become a better player. If you want to learn how to improvise or compose your own music, you're going to be more prepared for that. Maybe your dream is you just want to be in a cover band. Well, you can just memorize songs, but if you have an understanding of what you're playing, it makes it easier to learn and pick up on things, remember where you are in the fretboard, and that sort of thing. All right, podcast episode 144 is a wrap. Don't forget to check out the video that I posted on YouTube and Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe and follow and like and comment and share and all that good stuff as well. If you have any comments or questions, you could always comment on the video posted somewhere. You can also contact me through my website. Just scroll down, you'll see the little contact link. Maybe you want to suggest some ideas that I can talk about in future podcast episodes. You can do that at the website as well. And if you have not yet enrolled in a free video course, then make sure you go to that website, guitarmusictheory.com, answer the question I ask you about your playing, and then I will give you some options so you can choose the course that's the right fit for you right now. Maybe you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics. Maybe you're an advanced player that wants to delve deeply into music theory, or maybe you're somewhere in between. You need help with a specific technique, finger picking, or guitar soloing, or that sort of thing. So go to guitarmusictheory.com to enroll in your free video course now. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. Don't forget that my books, including Guitar Theory for Dummies, Fretboard Theory, Guitar Rhythm and Technique for Dummies, Guitar Picking Mechanics, and others, are available on Amazon.com. All right, that's all I've got to say today. So thanks for listening, guitar engineers. I'm Desi Cerna. Before you go, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it a good rating, and leave me a comment if you can. Then keep playing and stay tuned for more.